Good morning, Sherri. Welcome to the Gig Life. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fabulous. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, definitely. So, Sherri Yeary is a generational guru. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, it's interesting that I've been called the generational guru because my background and my first love is human resources. And I think it morphed from there. And my first job was in personnel. And so, if anybody remembers that old name, and I had my first supervisor and the guys in the shop, because I worked for a machine shop, they used to say, she was so mean. And I thought, you have to have a personality to work in personnel. And it was then that I realized that if I was going to succeed in personnel or HR, I needed to connect with the employees. I needed to be approachable. And so that was really my big first lesson when I started out in payroll and sort of personnel over 25 years ago. And it's like it's in my DNA. Anybody who does HR, because it has to be something you truly love because you're dealing with so many different types of individuals, conflict resolution. And so it really does, to me, it's just a DNA thing. If you love it, you truly love it.
Right. That's amazing. So, you've been doing this for 25 years. So, in those 25 years, you've probably found something that you like you love about the job, and maybe some things that you don't. So, let's start with the things that you like.
I love the interaction with the people. And it's one of the parts that you get to see how you can help people grow in their career and develop. And you can see what it can do for the organization when you can help create synergy and engagement just by the things that you have control of. Here's a funny thing I used to do when I was VP of HR. We had 55,000 employees, and I was new in that
Wow.
role. I used to put a big bowl of candy strategically on the front of my desk. And I was like, come hither, come to me, little ones. And it really worked because even the CEO, she would pop in every once in a while and she'd grab a Tootsie Roll and we'd stand there and chat. And that was exactly the intention. A bag of candy brought them to me so we could have conversation. And nobody went, hey, why are you in the HR office? No, it was because it was a
Right.
safe place.
I would have totally been there for that. I literally would have been one of the ones at your desk
Yeah,
all day,
and I'd
every
say,
day.
hey, have a seat, and then we'd be having conversation. So it wasn't a negative stigma when people had to go to HR. So that was really one of the ways that I was able to change the culture. And to me, that was really important.
Wow, that's awesome. So, with all the good, that something that maybe you weren't so hot about on the job when you're doing this.
Yeah, when I was on the job with a company, which was 15 years ago as of this month, because LinkedIn reminds me. That's the only way I remember. Thankfully, I get all these happy anniversaries, and I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, it's January. Um, when I was actually, I enjoy conflict resolution. That was one of the things that a lot of HR people shy away from because it's sticky, it's ucky, it's
Yeah,
not fun, and in my personal life, I hate conflict. But bring that to me in the workplace because it meant there was going to be a resolution. And so for anybody going into HR, I highly recommend getting training in crucial conversations and
yeah,
buying that book because conflict resolution is critical in that type of role when you're getting into HR, even dealing with your supervisors or other employees, customers. I call them my customers or my clients. Everybody's our own customer, internal or external. And so
right.
one of the things in HR most people don't like is that conflict, but it actually was something I really enjoyed because I got to see a resolution. I got to be like a maestro and working through that to the end. And it may not always be everybody's happy ending, but you did the right thing.
That's amazing advice. I know HR is tricky. My mom, growing up, she was an HR specialist. And I mean, I just remember some days she would come home and it would be like the worst day because she had to either lay off a slew of employees, and then so she knows each and one of their personal situations too. So it gets really, yeah, sometimes it does get sticky. That's not the fun part.
I was head of HR for Snelling Staffing. That's where we had 55,000 people, and we actually had temporaries in the Twin Towers. And so not only did we have workers, and then that became a workers' compensation issue, and then we had to deal with our employees who
Wow.
had trauma because of that, because they were across the street and they lost their clients, those temporaries they knew. And so, yeah, HR can be really tough some days. And because of that, we ended up going through a RIF, a layoff.
Yep.
And I remember sitting with absolutely every one of them and taking my little bag. Like there was that actor, and he would take his bag and he'd go from plane to plane to plane and he'd go in and lay off people. His name escapes me, but everyone goes, that was you. But when I walked into one of the locations and I was going to close it down, I remember saying, you can do this with dignity and respect. And that's one of my biggest tips for HR is we are not the know-all. And sometimes people in HR can forget that they're there to serve the people. The people aren't there to serve them.
Right.
That's our job. Our job is to serve our clients, our people, the employees. And that's the mentality.
That's, wow. I wish more, I mean, I've worked in corporate and other environments, and I have had really great HR people in my life, but I have friends who definitely don't have great HR folks in their life. And sometimes there are conflicts in the workplace, and they say to me, like, I really wish I could go to our HR department and talk about this, but I just can't. Mm-hmm. And so it's good that there's people like you out there.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be a safe place. And I hear this. I have 2 stepdaughters about your age, and one of them works in the school system, and she said the same thing to me. And it was about actually diversity and some harassment. And she goes, but I don't think the HR will help. And so I was able to give her a few tips, but then it takes courage to be able to do that. And so that's really huge. And so if one of the biggest tips I can tell new HR people is be approachable, be kind, and that way they will come to you, and then you're effective. When I left my last role 15 years ago as vice president, I remember thinking to myself as I was laying off all these people because the company was sold, what was I going to do? I had let go over half of the executive leadership team, and that was really, really stressful. And I thought, well, if I can serve all of these people from, 55,000 employees over 300 branches globally, I'd start my own HR business. Well, boy, was that kind of a fun little thought. For a hot second. And that was 15 years ago. And, I thought, okay, this organization is no longer culture led. And that's really where the rub comes. When you're in HR, if you don't feel like the organization is leading in a way that's congruent with you and your beliefs and values, it's time to go. It's just time to go. And so I was calling a few of our vendors, telling them about the changes. And one of them said, hey, we want to really have an HR part of our practice, because they sold financial investments. And so I went, okay. So I was the 4th partner. Shame on me. I had never been in business by myself or with 3 very strong men. And I'm a pretty strong woman, but these men and I worked together for over a year. And it was really quite a great recipe, because they would go out and talk to owners about financial investments and so on. And I was in there. And so if they had an issue, I would help them with their HR because they had companies. Well, I started writing my first book, just the thought of it. And the title back then was From Ties to Tattoos. And I was working on it. And at the time, my daughter was in treatment for her addiction. And so I was flying back and forth to Canada, writing this book. And I went to the guys and I said, you know what? Here's 90 days. I'm out of the partnership. I really want to focus on this book. And they're like, what book? And I said, well, it's just an idea, and started telling them about it. Next day, I was locked out of my office, of my computer, and that was it. And part of it was I decided to leave because the owner was sending pornographic material, and he was sending it to me and his clients. Now, most of his clients were 50, 60-year-old men who thought it was funny. It wasn't funny, and we were a publicly traded organization. So I had to put my foot down and say, I can't be part of this, because if I got the email, then I would be also negligent. So I decided I would go out and pursue things on my own. So not only did they lock me out of my computer and everything else, I had to start fighting for my clients. And they felt like they owned them, even though it was my business. So any HR person, I would highly recommend, if you're leaving and you want to try this on your own, that's great. But get some good sound advice about how to protect yourself, really, because that turned into a year-long lawsuit that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at the end of the day, I only gave them 3 of my clients that were not performing, and I got to keep all of the rest. And I fought for it, and it was worth it, because I wasn't going to let these men take what I had built. But I didn't have the knowledge and the ability 15 years ago to know I needed a concrete agreement.
Right.
So that was a big learning experience for me. And I was, 35 years old. So, fairly young, but had been in a vice president role. And so that's one of the other tips I'd give to HRs. If you decide to go out to business for yourself, get really good contracts with your consultants and non-competes. Because I've had consultants go direct to my client, right?
Yeah.
And go, hey, I'm going to be cheaper. So that's a good learning lesson. But you really do have to set up a business. And, that may not be today's thought, but eventually a lot of HR people decide, well, I have all this knowledge. Why not go out on my own?
Right. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for telling us your story and being very transparent. And it's important that, folks who are fans of the gig life and followers of the gig life to get the nitty gritty of each, profession, all the good, all the bad. So that way they can measure what they're readying up for and maybe some gaps that they need to fill before they get started. Because it's great to be an entrepreneur and it's great to start your business. But if you have no business fundamentals in your background, then it is important to do some research and make sure you're covered on both ends. So thank you so much for joining us today. Last but not least, if they want to get in touch and if they want to purchase your book, or how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, excitingly enough, my fourth book just got released on Amazon this week. And so everything can be reached and bought on generationalguru.com. And that's actually last piece of advice I'll give before we close is millennials are really great at learning a multitude of skills. In HR, you shouldn't just know HR. You should be looking at coaching. You should be looking at being, I've got a workers' comp adjuster's license, a benefits license. I'm a certified coach. Don't just get an HR degree, because when times get tough, HR loses their positions and then they don't have any other skills to rely on. So make yourself so valuable that you can be utilized in many areas, because that's what's going to be a great value for you in your career. Keep learning, keep growing.
So important. Thank you so much, Sherri. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us on the Gig Life, and we hope to see more from you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.